A person who goes by Otaku Radish made a PvZ fan game a few years back, naming it PvZ adding 75 new plants, 28 new zombies, all with different abilities and synergies that make every aspect of the game feel new and polished. But of course, with the existence of beauty, there also exists ugliness in the form of nearly impossible level designs that took careful strategy and hours of attempts. So let's see if I was able to conquer this beautifully painful game and what strategies I employed in the process. Oh, and about 89% of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, so if you end up enjoying the video, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Alright, let's begin. PvZ Beautiful Town has 25 levels in total, ranging from day, night, pool, and dual map levels. And the first level is a daytime level named Daytime Crisis. And as I mentioned in the intro, there's literally 70 plus plants added into this game. And the cool thing about this game is that it allows you to choose any plant you want on any level. And this is mainly due to the reason that the difficulty spikes pretty quickly after this first level, and there isn't really just one plant that you can use to power through every single level, as there's different strategies that you have to use against different zombies. So I made it my goal to try and use most of the plants in the game before the end. And for the first day, my plant consisted of some usual plants like the sunflower, twin sunflower, and doom shroom, but then the other 6 plants were completely new that I'll explain as we play out this level. And the first new plant is the Otaku Radish, made after the creator, and what it does is that costs 0 sun, but whenever you plant it, it gives you 100 sun instantly, which seems pretty powerful, but it also comes with the downside, being that the zombie that eats it gets boosted in basically every stat. And of course, to counter cheesing the plant, you can't shovel it, so it kind of just sits there until the zombies eat it. And the second new plant I brought in was Seedling, and you might recognize it from PvZ Heroes because you just saw it transform into a sunflower. And Seedling in this game is a low 25 sun cost plant that transforms into one of the other plants that you brought into the level. The only thing it can't transform into is upgrade plants such as the twin sunflower. The third and fourth new plants that I brought in are one, the Velociradish hatchling, and then the Velociradish hunter, which is also an idea from PvZ Heroes. And these synergize with each other because the hatchling, when planted in a 3x3 area, will boost any other hatchling in that area, and it's a 25% attack boost. And this boost also applies to the hunter, and you can see that the range of the hunter is wider as the number above it is higher than the hatchlings, and the number basically shows you how many other plants are boosting that one single plant. But another synergy that they have is that every hatchling planted reduces the hunter's sun cost by 10, which is pretty good. But if you look in the top lane, we're about to see a conehead eat the radish for the first time, and then it turns gold, meaning its stats are boosted, and it very easily eats through the 2 hatchlings, showing you just how overpowered it is. But now comes in the 5th new plant that I brought in, which was this green apple, and its ability is that when a zombie eats it, that zombie is now unable to attack any of my plants, and they kind of just stand there until they're defeated. And it's a pretty handy plant, but of course it struggles against zombies like gargantuars, which don't directly eat the plants. And as we're about to reach about that halfway point of the level, maybe you've noticed towards the left that the banana that I have in my plant slots, the number right beside it has been going up consistently. And to explain what's happening, that number indicates the amount of zombies that are dying by biting attacks. And once that number reaches 20, something special happens. The banana transforms into a Bananosaurus Rex, another plant that's of course from PvZ Heroes. And this is honestly one of the coolest plants in the game because when you place it down, it roams back and forth across the entire lane for the duration of the level, and it's able to solo just about any zombie that the game throws at you. And you might be thinking that this is pretty overpowered because you could just spam this in every lane and basically be unable to lose. But of course, with an overpowered plant, there has to be some balancing, and the balancing with the Bananosaurus Rex is that you can only have 2 per level. So though overpowered, there's still about 60% of the level that you do have to beat with other plants. And now as the final wave had come in and we had a decent army of hunters and hatchlings alongside the Rexes, we had beaten our very first level. Next up, But that was the last of the easy levels, as level 2 is named Heavy Armor and throws at us all the armored zombies in the game, which include the All-Star, the Bucket Heads, Screen Doors, Trash Can Zombies, and lastly, this zombie that looks like a P.E.K.K.A. And this guy is honestly diabolical. My lineup this time consisted a couple more original plants, such as the Pea Shooter and Snow Pea Shooter, alongside the Walnut, and then again, I brought the Sunflower, Twin Sunflower, Radish, and the Seedling, meaning that the only two new plants that I brought in this time were one, this purple looking guy, which is named the Aubergine Offering, and you'll see what it does, but the second plant I brought in was the Pine Clone, another plant from PvZ Heroes. And there really isn't any synergy here between the plants this time, as I wanted to just test out what the Aubergine Offering and the Pine Clone did. From its description, the purple plant is actually supposed to synergize with animal plants such as the dinosaurs, and you basically plant the dinosaurs on top of it for a stat boost. But it has a second pretty cool effect which I was very curious about, and you'll see that I'm trying to make a 3x3 pattern with the purple plants, because if you plant an Aubergine Offering right in the middle of the 3x3, something happens. And once I had the 3x3, I shoveled the middle Aubergine Offering and planted one right in the middle, which unleashed the Aubergine. And this is probably the coolest effect that a plant has in the entire game. And talking about cool effects, let's turn our attention to the Pine Clone for a second, as if you've played PvZ Heroes, you already know what it does, but once I planted it, all the plants in a 3x radius of it turned into a Pine Clone. And you might have noticed they even turned the Otaku radishes into Pine Clone, which basically makes it the only way that you can get rid of the Otaku radish that isn't a zombie eating it. And I find the chain effect so cool, where it basically transforms all the plants into Pine Clones, exactly like PvZ Heroes. But let's quickly turn our attention to the Aubergine again, as you've probably noticed it going all the way off screen now. And that exactly is what makes the Aubergine and Aubergine Offerings pretty useless in this game, as one, the setup of it takes a pretty long time and it's nearly impossible to pull off in the future levels, and once you do pull it off, the Aubergine doesn't even last half the level. So though a very cool effect and design, it's pretty useless to use later on. But now, as the first big wave was being sent in, I realized that the Pine Clones were pretty good, as they were able to destroy the All-Star in the bottom lane by themselves with the help of the Walnut. But too many of those tanky All-Stars, they could be a problem. So to support the Pine Clones, I was placing Walnuts and then also Snow Pea Shooters behind them to slow down the zombies. And the Snow Pea Shooter is actually a pretty useful plant in this game, as it's one of two plants that has the cold slowing down effect. There is a third plant with the slowing down effect, which is the Gloom Shroom, but you're only able to use it in the nighttime levels. And if you quickly look in the bottom lane, you'll see that the P.E.K.K.A. had arrived, but it got taken out very easily, which I actually don't know how this happened, as you'll see later on, it's much more devastating. But for now, my Pine Clones and my Walnut Snow Pea Shooter combo was able to get through most of the zombies without a problem. But you're about to see that the true challenge of the levels usually is within the final wave, as it just spams an insane amount of zombies. And though the Walnut Snow Pea Shooter Pine Clone combo is good, the Walnuts and Snow Pea Shooters got eaten through pretty fast, with the bottom lane looking treacherous, but thankfully they were able to defeat the zombies as I placed a Walnut to support them. But while this was happening, a P.E.K.K.A. in the very middle lane was completely destroying my Pine Clones one swing at a time. And this is why the P.E.K.K.A. is brutal, because it can one-shot basically any plant, just like the Gargantuar. It even three-shots the Walnuts. And you can't really notice it this level, but the worst part about the P.E.K.K.A. is that you can't put any status effects on it, such as the cold slowing down effect, and you kind of just have to power through it. And thankfully we had the lawnmowers to support us this time, as a zombie in the bottom lane made it all the way as well. But with that, we had now thankfully beaten the second level. Next up, Level 3, things get even more intense, as now we're put up against Gargantuars and also these Robo Mech Shooters that have long distance attacks. But the plants I choose this time are also pretty cool. Again, I bring in the Sunflower, Twin Sunflower, Otaku Radish, and Walnut, but this time I chose to focus on the magical faction plants in the game. And I say magical faction because the game actually has other factions such as Cosmic and Mecha, but I'll mention those as we use them later on. As for now, the first magical magical plant that we place is the rose, one that we're pretty familiar with from other games such as Garden Warfare and also PvZ Heroes. And the rose in this game has this normal attack, but every so often it'll just do a bigger attack that just does much more damage to the zombies. But the magical faction gets even better with this other plants, with the first one being the runic leaflet, and that's the plant in the top lane, and it has a pretty basic but powerful effect which boosts all magic plants attack power by 20%. And the cool thing about it is that you can stack as many as you can plant on the map. So if I was to plant 10 of them, my magical plants would have a 200% damage increase, and it doesn't have a radius as it affects all magical plants on the entire map. And the last magical plant that we brought into this level was the Lumos Lotus, and it's a pretty overpowered plant which charges up and shoots a barrage of projectiles at the zombies. And this guy paired with the runic leaflet is definitely one of the best combos in the game. The only downside is that the Lumos Lotus doesn't have full map range and you have to place it a little farther forward, so it's always a good idea to bring in roses for that long range damage if you have space in the back. And looking away from the magical plants for a second, we did bring in two other plants that aren't particularly magic, but they are very good. One you can already see on the screen, which is the angel looking thing on top of the walnuts, and this plant is called the Dreamland Cotton, and you plant it on top of a plant, and what it does is it gives that plant a physical damage reduction alongside healing it. So its job is basically just making the tanky zombies even tankier, and its description says that it only does it for a short amount of time, but it actually lasts very long. You'll see me using this plant pretty often throughout this entire challenge. But another plant that you'll see me using a lot later on is that last plant that we brought into the level, and it's called a Super Melon Black Hole. And I'll show you what it does as this last wave of gargantuars comes into every lane. The Super Melon Black Hole is an overpowered plant that if you plant it on top of a zombie, it'll take out that zombie without any problem, and it will literally take out every single zombie in the entire game besides the final boss, and it's the only plant with the capabilities to do so. And with that, level 3 had also been beaten. Next up, level 4 is called Head On Rampage, and it introduces some pretty diabolical zombies. The first of which is the blue all-star looking zombie, which is named the quarterback zombie. It basically has less health, but it's faster and deals 4 times more damage than the normal all-star. The second zombie is a turtle rider, which is basically a slow tanky zombie that can deal 300 damage from a medium range. The third zombie is the caravan zombie, and is basically a tank that deals 1,000 damage per second. The good thing about it though is that it dies instantly to spikeweed. And the last zombie, and I'm not even joking, it's named the obese zombie. And this one's really annoying because it can instantly eat any plant in one shot, and then after it eats it, it heals 600 health. So the main way you have to deal with them is just using long range plants. And my cast of plants this time included mostly ones we've already seen and ones that are just basic plants to the game. The only different one was this one called the Pea Patrol, which costs 300 sun, and it's probably my favorite plant in the entire game. At first, it has a pretty slow recharge and a high sun cost of 300, and if you look in the bottom lane, you'll see that I plant one there and it shoots a pea at long range towards the turtle rider, but as soon as it got close enough, it started doing its melee attack. And as soon as the turtle rider gets too close, the Pea Patrol pushes it back using its shield. And because of its shield pushback, it's pretty useful against zombies like the Gargantuar. And honestly, I'd say that the cost and the recharge is justified, but it gets even better because you can see on the lawn I have 9 pea plants right now, and as soon as I'm about to plant my 10th one, look at the sun cost of the Pea Patrol. It gets halved to 150, and its recharge also gets halved. And like I mentioned, once you have 10 pea plants on the lawn, this ability is activated. And truthfully, I don't really even know why that ability exists because it's overpowered as is, but of course I didn't mind and took advantage of the fast recharge and low sun cost, spamming as many Pea Patrols as I could. And by the halfway mark, I'd gotten down 3 columns of Pea Patrols and 3 columns of snow pea shooters. And this would be a good time to mention another thing that I really like about the game, and it's that each level lasts really long, meaning there's always time to pull off the strategies that you have in mind. And this level, even though it was only a little over halfway done, it already been 5 minutes, and the levels get much longer later on. But aside from that, you can see that the only problem that the Pea Patrol had was the caravan zombie and its insane damage. But I forgot to mention mention another thing that makes the Pea Patrol good, and that is basically a tank plant, meaning that even though its attack is pretty crazy, its health is crazy as well. It's just an all-in-one type of plant. The only thing it struggled with a little bit in this level was the balloon zombies, and I don't really know why because it is able to hit them, but sometimes they kind of just fly over, like the ones in the very top lane who actually ended up making it all the way to the lawnmower. But thankfully, if you look in the bottom right, this was the last horde of zombies, so we won't have to worry about that top lane anymore. And to deal with the annoying quarterback and balloon zombies in the middle, I just placed down a cherry bomb. And the rest of the zombies were just high health ones that were constantly getting pushed back by the Pea Patrol. So slowly but surely, we're able to take them out one by one, beating level 4. Next up, for level 5, the only new zombie introduced is the Z-Tech Nullifier zombie that you see in the very middle, but this guy would be better explained while we're in-game. But while we wait for it to come in, let me explain some new strategies and the new plants that I brought in. The first strategy is, if you look in the very top lane, is planting the radishes back to back in the same lane. I realized that the boost given to the zombies that eat the radishes isn't stacked, so if it happens to eat 4 radishes back to back, it'll only be given the boost once. So of course I took advantage of this, getting a pretty good sun boost in the beginning and planting more sunflowers. And I kind of just let the first zombie that came into that lane eat through all the radishes, and as I was making it towards the end, normally I would just cherry bomb it, but I realized that the cherry bomb might be better used a little later on, so I kind of just let it eat the sunflowers and reach the lawnmower, taking it out that way. But now let's get on to the overpowered cast of plants that I brought in. The first is the durian pult, which is the melon pult looking thing, and it basically shoots the zombies, poisoning them, and it ignores all armor. And this thing is insane against most zombies, especially ones like the all-stars. This is definitely one of the best plants that I could have brought into every level, but I realized after this level that it was too overpowered and I should just use the other plants more, only bringing this guy out for special cases. The second plant I brought in, maybe top 5 plants in the game, was the orchid, and it's the pink flower looking one that's boosting the durian pults. And I don't know the exact percentages, but what it does is it gives the plants in a 3x3 around it a speed boost, which includes sunflowers, making them produce sun even faster. The third plant I brought in was the tanky one that you see up front, which is called the fern stand, and it's a tanky plant that costs 25 more sun than the plant, but it also has 1,000 more health. And the fern stand's good, but it's kind of mid compared to all the other tanky plants in the game, and you'll see those guys later on. But the last plant that I brought in was the melon mortar, and as its name implies, it's just a mortar that you can place on any melon pult looking plant, transforming it into a mortar that can shoot into its own lane and adjacent lanes. And the cool thing about it is that it shoots the projectiles of the plant that it was evolved from. And you can see these constant massive hordes of cone heads and any other tanky zombies that are not immune to the poison effect, they just get destroyed instantly. Even the bucket heads don't make it halfway past the first tile. And as the final wave's coming in, I kind of realized that we don't really get to see the new zombie that was introduced in the level, and basically what it does is it shoots a ray at the plant closest to it, nullifying that plant, making it not able to do anything. And that's basically it for that zombie. But I did forget to mention in one of the previous levels that the P.E.K.K.A, even though it itself has that immunity to the status effects, it also has an aura boost that provides that same effect to zombies around it in a 3x3 radius. And you can see that the P.E.K.K.A is a pretty good counter to the durian pult because the poison status effect doesn't do anything against it, and you have to deal with it just with the normal damage. But thankfully the fern stand comboed with the dreamland cotton was able to hold down the P.E.K.K.A for a pretty long time, which allowed me to use my cherry bombs and then just prayed that the durian pult's damage was enough to deal with it, which the top one eventually got taken out, but the bottom one was taking a little longer. But thankfully we did have a pretty steady defense of the fern stands and dreamland cottons, and eventually my army of durian pults was able to take it out, and we had finally beaten level 5. Next up, level 6 you can instantly tell is going to be an interesting one because one, it's named wave by wave, and then you take a look at the zombies that'll be sent in. A combo of the Gargantuars, P.E.K.K.A, who is actually named the Dark Knight, and the quarterback zombie. And this time I knew that I was going to have to bring some heavy hitting plants. So most of my lineup was pretty similar to earlier with the snowflowers, walnuts, otaku radishes, but this time I brought in 2 new plants, one of which was the bamboo bombard. It's basically an explosive damage dealing plant that does a ton of damage, and the second plant I brought in was the dragon cannon, another insanely heavy damage dealing plant. And the game, to start off, sent in a gargantuar, and I didn't have enough sun for either of the two, so I started off with a snow pea shooter to slow it down tremendously. And then, as I still wanted to focus on my setup, as I got enough sun, I planted an orchid instead of the dragon cannon or bamboo because I felt like it'd be better long term. I was also planting otaku radishes at any given point that it recharged because the otaku radish doesn't actually boost the gargantuars since the gargantuar doesn't directly eat it. And while this gargantuar was being stalled constantly by me placing plants in front of it and the snow pea comboed with the orchid, I was getting down snow pea shooters and another orchid in other lanes as well. And then I noticed that the gargantuar's form actually shaped, meaning that it was taking a pretty hefty amount of damage just from the snow pea shooter. So instead of just completely sacrificing the lane, I thought it might be possible to defeat it, so I placed a cherry bomb, doing even more damage to it. And it was insanely close to hitting the arcade, but I was able to plant a sunflower right in front of it, and instead it hit the sunflower, and right as it was about to reach the arcade, the snow pea shooter actually took it out. I was honestly kind of impressed because I did not expect that to happen. And in the lane that the second gargantuar appeared, we actually had a dragon cannon down alongside a snow pea shooter and an arcade, and then I actually got a bamboo bombard down in that lane as well. But then I realized that I made a mistake by bringing in both the snow pea shooter and the dragon cannon together because they're anti-synergy with each other. The snow pea shooter slows the gargantuar down with the ice, but then the dragon cannon shoots it and it melts the ice. So the gargantuar is just in a constant cycle of going fast and slow, then fast and slow. But at the same time, you can see that the insane damage the dragon cannon and the bamboo do because they're able to pretty easily take out that gargantuar. And then I got a little scared of the quarterback, so I used the cherry bomb to take them out. And then the game threw at us the last variant of the level, the Dark Knight. And this guy is actually probably the easiest zombie that we face in this level, since the only status effect dealing plant we have is the snow pea shooter, and the other two are just pure damage. And due to that reason, we're able to take out the Dark Knight very quickly without the need of even a cherry bomb. But right after, a problem occurred as a quarterback appeared in the very top lane where I had otaku radishes planted, and it ate through them, getting speedier and more powerful. And you can see that the power is pretty crazy as it's eating through my plants very quickly. And losing that dragon cannon and bamboo was basically a 600 sun loss in a way. But we were ready for the next one that appeared in the top lane as I planted a walnut for it, but then one appeared in the lane under it. And this quarterback, although it got its helmet knocked off pretty early on, it ate through my dragon cannon, which was expected, but then it also ate through my orchid, snow pea shooter, and even the sunflowers. And at this point, I basically just had to sacrifice the lawnmower in that lane as I didn't have my cherry bomb up. But looking away from that atrocity, I knew that after I defeated these two gargantuars and dark knights in the bottom three lanes, that the final wave would appear, meaning that 4 of the lanes would be taken care of the lawnmowers if needed be, and I really only had to focus on that top middle lane as it had lost that lawnmower. But the creator was actually very nice on this last wave, as the amount of zombies that came in were a lot less than I expected. And in the main lane that we were worried about, it only sent one dark knight, which of course was very easily taken out. And then with only one gargantuar left, I was pretty confident that we're gonna win. And a couple seconds later, I planted down a cherry bomb, taking out the gargantuar, and we beat level 6 on our first attempt, although it got a little tricky at the end. Next up, level 7 was named Brain Eating Exercise, and I don't know what that's supposed to imply, but what I do know is that it had some annoying zombies like the All-Stars, quarterbacks, and the caravan zombies. Another annoying zombie is the one on the very bottom, and it's basically a teleportation zombie that teleports 2 tiles forwards after it gets hit for the first time. And it isn't particularly annoying on this level, but you'll see what I mean during the end game. And I wasn't really sure what to bring in this level, so I chose to bring in most of the regular plants, but then also the spiky shooter, devil nut, and the corn dog, which you might be familiar with from PvZ Heroes. And to start off, the devil nut was one of the wall plants that I was talking about that's way better than the fern stand. And the reason that it's better is that any zombie that attacks it, be a normal zombie that's eating away at it, or even the gargantuars that are hitting it with its plank, it curses them and applies a physical resistance reduction, basically making the zombies weaker to my plant's attack. quarterbacks. And the second new plant that I brought in was the corn dog, and as this pole vaulting zombie approaches, you'll see that the corn dogs move into its lane to attack it. And that's basically its ability, where it can move into its adjacent lanes to attack the zombies that are approaching in them. But at the same time, you could see that two corn dogs didn't really even do half the health of the pole vaulting zombie, so I kind of lost trust in it right away. Like, its mechanic where it moves up and down seems pretty cool, but its damage isn't high enough to justify really using it. And lastly, the third plant that I brought in was the spiky shooter, who similarly to the magic plant that I'd brought in earlier, shoots kind of a barrage of projectiles at the zombies, but this guy doesn't have a recharge and its projectiles pierce through the zombies. The only downfall of it compared to the Loomis Lotus is that its damage is a lot lower. And this low damage was pretty detrimental to us to start off, because in the top lane a quarterback appeared in the Otaku Radish that was in that lane, and it was just rummaging through all my plants. And as soon as it quickly ate through the Devil Nut, I knew I was gonna just have to let the lawnmowers take it. But while that was happening, an All-Star in the bottom lane basically did the same thing, eating through all my plants while not even taking a sliver of damage. And eventually it made it to the lawnmower as well. But you've probably already noticed, the caravan right above was doing the same exact thing, as it completely drove through all my plants, not even giving them a chance to survive. So another lawnmower had to be sacrificed. And from now on, you're gonna notice me just calling the All-Star and the quarterback zombies just football zombies to make it easier, because they basically do the same thing. One just has more health and one has more damage. Oh, and we lost the middle lawnmower to a teleporter zombie, because it's basically like a bucket head in health, and the spiky shooter did not do enough damage to kill it. And at around this time, it was looking pretty bad, because we basically lost all our lawnmowers and we're only past the first big wave. But even with all this happening, I was able to recuperate around the time that the second big wave came in, getting a pretty decent amount of defenses down. And the caravan in the top lane was looking pretty detrimental, as it took out the Devil Nut, but I was able to use a cherry bomb to take it out, and now all we had to worry about was the All-Stars / football zombies in the bottom lanes. And after the second big wave, is honestly looking pretty good, as I had a fairly good amount of defenses down. I even started replacing the sunflowers in the back, as I had enough sun for more defenses. But as the final big wave comes in, you'll see why I've been saying that the spiky shooters and the corn dogs aren't very much a viable strategy to defeat this game. Because at first glance, these defenses look pretty powerful and good enough to defeat all the zombies on this map, but then there's just a stampede of zombies and caravans sent to take out all my tanky defenses. And once the Devil Nut in the bottom lane was taken out by the zombies and I didn't have a replacement for it right away, I knew that things were about to get bad. And the zombies kind of just kept on coming in without an end in sight. And these spiky shooters did not have enough damage to deal with these guys. I was even about to get the cherry bomb by the time the football zombies reached the end, but even if I defeated those in the bottom lane, all the other lanes were about to get eaten through as well. And this marked our very first loss in this game. But of course, we can attempt this level as many times as we need and with as many combos as we need as well. And a little frustrated by that last level, as I'd literally spent 10 minutes playing it, I decided to bring in the OP combo of the magic plants, with this time leaving out the Lumos Lotus and only bringing in the runic leaflet and the rose. Oh, and also the spikeweed for the caravans. And the only reason I brought in the rose was because I wanted to see how good it was by itself, because I knew that the other plant was good, but I was unsure about the rose itself. And you can see in the middle lane that one rose and one leaflet by itself isn't enough to take out the all-stars, but thankfully as I ate through the sunflower, I had a cherry bomb ready to take it out. And while this was happening, I was also planting the devil nuts for the defenses in the future. You can also see me employing the Otaku Radish strategy in the top lane, but I didn't even need to use a cherry bomb or a high damaging plant, as the rose was able to take it out by itself. And as the first big wave came in, I knew that this attempt was going to be much better, because I hadn't lost a single lawnmower yet, and on the last attempt I'd already lost 4 of them by this time. And I literally only had one rose in each lane paired with the leaflets and of course the devil nuts, but last time I definitely had a lot more damaging plants down. And by the time that the second big wave came in, my defense basically felt impenetrable. All the roses were pretty easily able to take out all the normal zombies, and if the caravan got too close, the spikeweeds were able to deal with them. And like I did in the last attempt, I was replacing the sunflowers in the back with more defenses, as I'd collected enough sun to do so. And what's even crazier about this attempt is that I didn't even bring in the Orchid to assist with sun production or attack speed for the roses. And I should mention that the Dreamland Cottons are honestly insane, as they make it to where I don't have to keep on planting the devil nuts constantly, and they just heal by themselves over time. And you might have not even noticed that the third and final wave was already on its way in. The roses damage was just so good that it made it seem like the zombies were a lot less in numbers than last time. And honestly, a shadow MVP of this attempt was definitely the spikeweed, as it took care of the caravan zombies instantly. And although the football zombies are strong, I'd say that the caravans were the biggest threat before this. But now, with us defeating the last teleporter, we had finally beaten level 7 on our second attempt. Next up, Level 8, as the title implies, was the very first night level, which means that our catalog of plants that we could use had now opened up a little more, adding all the mushroom plants. And as we jump into the level, you're going to notice that my lineup consisted of a lot of familiar mushrooms like the Doom Shroom, Scaredy Shroom, Hypno Shroom, and Puff Shroom, alongside of course the Sun Shroom. But I also brought in 2 new ones, being the Goop Shroom, which I explained earlier but I will explain again, and then also the Punish Shroom, which you might be familiar of from PvZ Heroes. Scaredy Shroom is pretty similar to itself in the other games, where it does a pretty good amount of damage, but then it hides when a zombie gets close to it. But the main attraction this level was the Punish Shroom, and you'll get to see it work in that top middle lane as the newspaper zombie was coming in. So I planted a Puff Shroom, and as that Puff Shroom got eaten, the Punish Shroom hit it with the thing, and then the second Puff Shroom got hit, and then the Punish Shroom hit it again, killing the newspaper zombie. So basically what the Punish Shroom does is that whenever a mushroom in its lane gets eaten, it shoots a pretty powerful attack at the zombie that ate the mushroom. So it's a plant that's very synergy based, but it can be good if used correctly, as it only costs 25 sun as well. And of course, the second new one that I brought in was the Goop Shroom, which basically acts as a fume shroom, but it also slows the zombies down. And it's one of the 3 plants in the game that's reliably able to do that. And that kind of was the gist of this level, as the zombies in it weren't too difficult to beat, as it was the first level technically of the night levels. And as I'd farmed enough sun, I started replacing the Sun Shroom in that third column from the back with more Scaredy Shrooms, just for more damage. And of course, as the final big waves would come in, I'd use the Doom Shroom to instantly take them out. And with this last horde of zombies pretty easily being beaten by all the powerful attackers that were on the field, level 8 had pretty easily been defeated. Next up, Level 9 was named Iron Wall, and as the name implies, it sends in all the annoying tanky zombies. And to fend off these tanky zombies, I brought in a seedling, which in the middle transformed into the other plant that I brought in, which was the Smoosh Shroom, another plant that's inspired from PvZ Heroes. And it's a pretty good plant in this game, as whenever a zombie gets one tile in front of it, it does a melee attack, stunning them and rapidly attacking them, doing a pretty significant amount of damage. And then it like recharges for a second, doing another attack right after. And it was able to take out the screen door zombie within 3 attacks, which is pretty impressive for a plant that isn't meant to attack against the screen door zombie. And this wasn't a new plant, but I also brought in the potato mine, because if you look in the top lane, paired with the Otaku radish, it works pretty well. You can kind of just spam the radishes and then plant a potato mine right behind them, waiting for a zombie to reach that point. And even most boosted zombies aren't able to survive a potato mine explosion. But that aside, the second new plant that I brought in, you'll see it in the bottom middle lane. It's called the Scorp Poison Grass. It's a 400 sun cost plant that attacks zombies, dealing poison damage, and then also does a melee attack if they get too close. But a special effect it has is that whenever the zombie it's attacking dies, that zombie deals poison damage in a 3x3 radius to all the zombies around it, doing some pretty crazy damage. But the only downside of this plant is the normal damage it does is pretty mediocre. And paired with this level where all the zombies are just tanky zombies, it's almost impossible to get a zombie to die from its attack. So the main carry this level was definitely the Smoosh Shroom, as it had enough damage to deal with a lot of the zombies. But I say a lot because it wasn't all of them, as this football zombie in the top middle lane ate through it almost instantly. And then at that point I had to just sacrifice that lane because I felt like there wasn't any plant that I had that could take it down instantly. The potato mine could have done it, but it would have taken time to recharge, and it just didn't have that time. And then if you look in the middle lane, the eating zombie was also a problem because it instantly just ate the smooth shroom, completely countering it. So that lane and its mower was also sacrificed. And then right after, I saw a caravan coming into the bottom middle lane, so I planted a potato mine, but then I realized that the potato mine was not going to have enough time, so I resorted to using a doom shroom, taking out the caravan and all the other zombies that were on the lawn. Well, of course, except the teleporting zombie in the very bottom lane, because it's basically immune to the first attack it takes, and it teleports 2 tiles forward and then it takes damage. And I keep mentioning the teleport zombie because you'll see towards the end levels why it was maybe one of the most annoying zombies in the entire game. But for now, my main goal was just trying to survive this level, as it's looking pretty bad. It kind of felt like if there's another eating zombie in any of the lanes without a lawnmower, that I just lose it instantly, as I didn't have a counter for it, because I don't really understand how it works, as sometimes it'll just normally attack a plant, but then right after it'll just swallow it whole, regaining a third of its health, and then you have to even do more damage to it. And then of course there were the football zombies, like the one in the top lane, that were a threat to all my plants that I brought into this level. But somehow, as we're approaching the final wave, it started to seem like I had a pretty good setup, but I made a mistake in using the doom shroom right here to take out this eating zombie, because right after the final wave was sent in. And I say it was a mistake because I had a potato mine behind the smooth shroom, and that would have taken care of the eating zombie, and I could have saved the doom shroom for the final wave. But thankfully the final wave was long enough that I was able to get another doom shroom, and thankfully they didn't send in too many zombies into the lanes that I didn't have lawnmowers in, because we did end up losing a lawnmower in the very top lane and then also the very bottom lane. But the potato mine in the bottom middle lane was able to take out the fat zombie, and we beat level 9 on our first attempt. I was honestly pretty surprised because I expected to lose, but nevertheless, next step is Day 10 was called the Night of the Dead, and it had a pretty annoying lineup, but I did notice a similarity with all the zombies. And that was the fact that none of them had status immunity. So this time I took the chance to use some plants that I didn't really know much about, which were the cosmic plants. And for my main attackers, I only brought in durian pole and melon mortar, as I knew that they'd be enough for all the zombies sent within this level. Also, another little change I made was bringing in the sunflower instead of just the sunshroom, and that was because I felt like the sunshroom by itself doesn't really produce enough sun, and since my main attackers are such high cost plants, I'm definitely going to need the extra sun. And another mistake I was making within the night levels was bringing in the otaku radish, because I hadn't realized that it actually only gives you half the sun on these levels. But you'll see me realize this later on as I stop bringing it in. But for now, I planted down the 2 cosmic plants that I brought in, one which was the walnut and one was the cosmic gourd. And the cosmic plants are basically the definition of synergy, as they have some defensive plants like the walnut and then also some offensive ones that I didn't bring in, but mainly they work off of plants that provide them with cosmic energy like the cosmic gourd. Or so I thought, because I'd assumed that the gourd itself produced energy, but apparently it doesn't. It's only there to store the energy, which seems pretty useless. So I kind of just shoveled them up on this level, but I'll still explain the benefits of if we had the cosmic energy. The walnut is basically like a normal walnut if it doesn't have cosmic energy, but with each cosmic energy that it's given, it can survive multiple hits from gargantuars. So it becomes pretty overpowered for just a 50 sun cost plant. And then of course, the offensive plants for the cosmic faction would just do more attacks if they had more cosmic energy. But that's all I'll say for the cosmic faction, as I don't actually use it after this. Like, the idea is cool, but I felt like there wasn't enough of them to justify me using them. And also, they might have been good for the earlier levels, but for the later levels, they just aren't good enough to defeat the zombies and the hordes. So moving away from the cosmic plants, you can see that I had an army of durian pults built up, and they were kind of just destroying all the zombies, including the gargantuars. The only thing that we had to focus on was making sure that I was using some sacrificial plants to stall the gargantuars, because though the poison is effective from the durian pole, it takes some time with high health enemies like the gargs. So this one in the top middle lane was definitely getting a little far, but I used the doom shroom to clean it up. And now, as the final wave was coming in, we had a pretty solid defense setup, so I wasn't too worried. And the doom shroom had also recharged, so I was able to use it right away. And all the little zombies within the level were very easily defeated, as they're kind of just poisoned away. And now with only these 2 gargantuars left, I was pretty confident in our win, and so I used the doom shroom and we beat level 10. Next up, Level 11 was named Hearts of Iron, and usually iron stands for bucket heads and other tanky zombies, so to counteract their high health, I of course brought in the dragon cannon. But this was definitely a risky move as it was my only attacker and the rest were kind of just supportive plants, so I had to make sure that I was getting enough sun within the beginning of the level. And of course, to make my life even harder, the game sent in the bucket head for the very first zombie. And I knew I couldn't really use a dragon cannon for it at this point in time, but I was still prepared and had a Doomshroom ready for it. But killing that zombie, of course, sent in the next zombie right away, which was another bucket head, but this time it was super powered by the radishes. And I placed down a devil nut to stall it, and thankfully it was able to stall it long enough that the Doomshroom's recharge had come back and I was able to use it to take out this bucket head as well. I do like that the Doomshroom doesn't leave a tile dead after it's used. That's very much needed in the later levels. But that aside, I placed my first dragon cannon in that top lane because the Doomshroom's recharge was too far away and there was an annoying sentry bot going for my plants. And around this time, I'd basically set up all my sun producers, so I knew it was time to place down more dragon cannons and more devil nuts comboed with the Dreamland cottons. And by the time the first big wave was sent in, we had a column and a half of dragon cannons and then also a column of the walnuts. A cool thing about the dragon cannon is that it only has a high cost and thankfully the recharge of it is very quick. So if you have enough sun, you can kind of just spam them. And that's exactly what I did as I placed 4 columns of them before that final wave came in. And I'm not gonna lie, there's not much in this game that can survive against this many dragon cannons. Even the caravans being sent in were being destroyed like there were spikeweed under them. And with that, this was probably the fastest level that we played in this entire game. It was only 4 minutes long while the rest of them reach around 10 minutes. But that aside, next up is Level 12 got a little serious as it was named Midnight Assault and it had the Dark Knight paired with football zombies, but most annoyingly the Digger zombie. And at least for this level in particular, you'll see why I call it the most annoying. And still trying to use new plants each and every level, this time I chose to use a couple of mecha plants, with the 2 I brought in being the Mecha Pea Shooter and Mecha Gatling Pea. But before we get to explaining what those guys do, I should mention that I also brought in the Pea Patch. The Pea Patch is another plant that comes originally from PvZ Heroes, and it's basically like the pea vine from PvZ 2 as it boosts the pea shooter or the pea shooter like plant that's planted on top of it. But it's a little different from pea vine as it doesn't shoot itself and it only provides a boost to the plant. And as I brought in the Mecha Pea Shooter and Mecha Gatling Pea, I thought that the Pea Patrol and the Pea Patch would be great fits as they combo and synergize well. Because if you remember, if you get 10 pea plants down, the Pea Patrol halves its cost and recharge. And luckily, the Mecha Pea Shooter, Mecha Gatling Pea, and the Pea Patch all count towards this. But very quickly, I realized as this football zombie was approaching in the top lane that I might have overestimated the power of the Mecha Gatling Pea, as I thought it would be really strong and take out this football zombie, but then as the football zombie got closer and closer, I realized that it wasn't going to do enough damage. So I had to plant a Pea Patrol down kind of as a tank, and that ended up working out. But now to explain what the Mecha plants do, they're basically just a more powered up version of their normal plant, but the drawback is that if they die from a zombie or even get shoveled up, they explode and they do damage to all your plants in a 3x3 radius. And most of the time, they're just gonna wipe out the plants they do damage to, unless it's a tanky plant like a walnut or the Pea Patrol. And normally, the strategy would be planting them all the way in the back so the zombies don't have a chance or it's the least chance to reach them. But if you remember, in the beginning of the level, I mentioned that this level had the Digger zombies, and I didn't take that into account when bringing in the mecha plants. And for a while, things were going great as we hadn't seen them yet, and all the plants were doing pretty solid damage and surviving against the football zombies or even the other tanky zombies. But then chaos struck in the very top lane as now we're seeing the zombie mine all the way to the back. And at this point, I kind of panicked and didn't really know what to do, so I kind of just let it go. Because I was like, oh, I'll just lose that plant and the 2 sunflowers. But then it exploded, exploding the other Mecha Pea Shooters, which exploded the other Mecha Pea Shooters and had a chain reaction, taking out nearly all my sun producers. And for some reason, while playing, I'd completely forgotten what just happened, and I started planting the Mecha Pea Shooters in the same exact place again. I don't really know why I did this. It's probably the worst move I could make. It would have just been better to abandon the Mecha plants for now and just focus on the Pea Patrols, as we'd gotten them down to that half recharge, half cost range. But about 30 seconds later, I did realize that planting the Mecha Pea Shooters in the back was a bad idea, and this is also where I realized that shoveling them them made them explode as well, because I went to shovel one of them and it exploded right away. But we still had a problem, which were the zombies in the back that we didn't really have a counter against. So we kind of had to just let them eat through our sunflowers and sunshrooms and then plant some pea patrols when they got far up. And thankfully, since the pea patrol is tanky, it would stall until another pea patrol would be up. And in doing this, I was able to just spam a bunch of pea patrols throughout the level, but if you look in the top left, there was a problem in sun production. I would try to plant sunflowers down, but the zombies would just mine to the back, and there were so many of them that they'd always just take my sun producers out before I got any valuable sun. And this was bad, because when the final wave came in, I didn't have enough pea patrol and enough sun to keep replanting them. And even worse, I'd lost so many peas that the cost of the pea patrol went back up to 300. And as we lost the last two lawnmowers, I realized it was GG's in that bottom middle lane and the very top lane. And so this marked level 12, the second level that we lost on. On my second attempt, I still stuck with that pea shooter synergy, but this time abandoning the mecha ones and instead bringing in a split pea and the snow pea shooter. The snow pea would be good against the hordes of tanky zombies, and the split pea is only there to fend off the digger zombie. So by the time we reached that first flag, I had a decent amount of sun producers down with the column of snow pea shooters, split peas, and pea patrol with some pea patch under them. It was definitely looking a lot better than last time. And as they mined to the back, they were able to eat some of my sun producers, but thankfully the split pea were able to deal with them after 1 to 2 tiles. So it was still a little chaotic at times, but not as bad as last time. And this level also made me realize that this game was getting much harder by this point, because even with this decent amount of defenses down with 3 columns of pea patrols, snow pea shooters, split peas, and even the occasional doom shroom, my defenses were still getting overwhelmed just by the sheer amount of zombies that the game was sending. Like if I didn't have the doom shroom here, I think I would have lost, as the final wave sometimes sends in 2 final waves instead of just 1. And the balloon zombies, like the ones in the middle lane, are always annoying because they somehow make it through all my defenses all the way to the lawnmowers. But thankfully, it looked like there weren't any surprise second final waves, and with these last 2 zombies defeated, we had thankfully beaten level 12 on our second attempt. Up next is... And if you thought level 12 was bad, level 13 was about to get much worse because it was called All Out Attack. Honestly, that last attack on level 12 felt like an all out attack, so I knew that this was going to be much worse. But there were some plants that I'd been wanting to try, but I felt like they might be too overpowered, and this felt like the right level to try them out. And one of the new plants is Tiger Grass, which PvZ 2 does have a Tiger Grass as well, but this one is different from that one. And the second plant you might know from PvZ Heroes as well is the Soul Patch. And I should mention that I brought in Durian Pole and Goop Shroom because even though that I knew that the Tiger Grass and Soul Patch would be good, there still was a little doubt in my mind. And since this was the last normal nighttime level and it was named All Out Attack, I was expecting the worst. So I did bring in the Orchid to boost mainly the Sun Shrooms, but then I also brought in the Devil Nut just in case the Soul Patch wasn't good enough, of course the Doom Shroom, and lastly the Dreamland Cotton just to top it off. And you can see this level meant business because it was one of the first levels that had 4 big waves, and also all the beginning zombies weren't coming in one at a time, and it was multiple zombies at a time, which of course forced extra sun uses on defensive plants instead of sun producers. And the Orchid pairs well with the Sun Shroom because it allows them to grow faster than normal, so it felt like I didn't really need to bring in the Sunflower and the Twin Sunflower this time. And since I now have the Tiger Grass planted down, it is a good time to explain what it does. It can basically attack any zombies in a 3x3 radius around it, and that means to the front, to the side, and even behind. And the damage it does is pretty decent as well. And you might have noticed that I didn't bring in the Split Pea to counter the Digger zombie, and instead I was hoping that the Tiger Grass could do the job. And after planting it and instantly taking out the zombie, I knew that it was fit for the job. And even better, I only needed to plant 2 in the back since it had that 3x3 radius range. And if you look in the top left, you'll see that the Orchid comboed with the Sunshroom is pretty insane, as I literally almost had 4,000 extra sun. And this is impressive because most of my plants are pretty high cost. And this would also be a good time to mention what the Soul Patch does, and it's basically a walnut plant with an insane amount of health. If you look in the very bottom lane, you'll see that it can push back zombies that get too close as well just by punching them. And this is one of its 2 forms, because the second form, if you click on the Soul Patch, it kind of does a T-pose and protects all the plants in its lane. This is kind of the ability that makes it similar to how it is in PvZ Heroes, where it tanks the damage for your hero. But I think for the time being, its first form is better, as it's good against Gargantuars and big zombies, as it can just push them back. If you look in the top lane, you'll see that if a Gargantuar is by itself, it's way too slow to even get close to the soul patch, as it keeps getting punched back whenever it gets close. Oh, and I haven't mentioned this, but the soul patch also slowly heals itself over time. I actually didn't know this, and that's why I brought in the Dreamland Cotton, but if I had known this, I wouldn't even brought it in. So I think it's safe to say, even though the Devil Nut is a pretty overpowered, low-cost tanky plant, the soul patch definitely outshines it in levels like these. Oh, and there's actually one thing about the Doom Shroom that I completely forgot to mention up until this point. If you look in the very front, you'll see that I plant a Doom Shroom, and it actually takes out 2 of my soul patches and Dreamland Cottons. And that's kind of the drawback of Doom Shroom in this game, instead of making a dead tile. And the Doom Shroom can sometimes be annoying to use when you have a full lawn like this, because you're guaranteed to lose a couple of plants. And it's usually your soul patches, since they're always planted up front. But soul patch glaze aside, we're now on the final wave of this level, and if you look up front, you're going to see a different looking Gargantuar. It's a Gargantuar that's wearing football attire, and is called the defensive end. This is also a zombie inspired by PvZ Heroes. And in this game, you could kind of think of it as a Gargantuar comboed with the newspaper zombie, because once its helmet falls off, it has a 4x speed boost and also a 1.5x power boost. But thankfully, we didn't have to see what that looked like, as I used a Doom Shroom and they got KO'd instantly, with me beating all out attack on my first attempt. And next up, we see the pool levels, with the first level being Level 14, the first of 3 pool levels, is named Fire in the Pool. And I don't really know what Fire in the Pool stands for, as there isn't anything fire based about the level. And continuing with the topic of confusion, I was kind of confused on all 3 pool levels. There aren't really any pool specific plants, like normally there's the sea shroom or like the tangle kelp, but those guys just don't exist in this game. So I was very unsure of what to bring. And so for the first level, I of course brought in the lily pads, and I also brought in the tiger grass, because I knew if I got into a pickle, I could plant them on the lawn close to the pool and they'd be able to hit the zombies in the pool. I also brought in the super melon black hole just to help me stall the zombies in the beginning, as now I couldn't use the doom shroom, and the cherry bomb as a replacement as well. But the rest of the plants were kind of just randomly chosen, like the soul patch, who I didn't really need in this level, but I brought it anyways as it performed well in the last level. I also brought in the bamboo bombard just for some damage, and thankfully the bamboo was a good choice, because the tiger grass kind of struggle against the football zombies, and the bamboos are able to deal with them pretty reliably. We just need to make sure that we stall the football zombies a little bit, since the bamboos attack pretty slowly. And of course, lastly, I brought in the orchid along with the sunflowers, because those are kind of just the go-to for sun production. The orchid you'll probably see in every level from now on, since it's probably the best supportive plant in the game. It's good in helping in sun production, and it's good in supporting the attacking plants as well. It's really cool to see a supporting plant that also boosts the sunflowers. That's kind of one of my favorite things about this game. But all in all, after I had these defenses down and the final wave was coming in, I knew that this level was going to be pretty easy to defeat. The bamboo are pretty good against the football zombies, and the tiger grass deal with the annoying balloon zombies. And after taking out these last 2 screen door zombies in the bottom lanes, we'd be in the first pool level. And next up, Level 15 is named Mechanical Storm, and it's mainly referring to the robotic enemies, and all the zombies / enemies in this level aren't too difficult, but that made me think that maybe the game was about to send a massive horde of them. And again, I was confused on what to bring in, so this time I went with the magic plants, mainly the Lumis Lotus and the Runic Leaflet, as they're pretty reliable. And like I mentioned, the zombies aren't too difficult, but the game pulled a fast one on me this time, as I thought this would be the only zombie sent in, but a machine came in after it, and then it did its special ability, super speeding all the way to the lawnmower. And even worse, the lawnmower actually doesn't hit the other zombies, since it just drops right into the water. And in this game, you can't buy the water lawnmowers that travel all across the pool, so I had to resort to using the super melon black hole. But just to make sure that that didn't happen again, I planted a lily pad and then a soul patch on it in the lane that lost the lawnmower. And this also indicated to me that now it was time to stop farming sun and instead start preparing the offensive plants. And if you look in the pool, you'll see me plant a lily pad and a Lumis Lotus right on top of it, but I actually didn't know this until I'd already beaten the pool levels, but you can plant the Lumis Lotus in the water without the lily pad. So that kind of was a waste, but it wasn't too big of a deal. And also these Rhino robots were getting a little annoying because the one in the top lane took out my runic leaflet as the other plant was trying to take it out, but was unsuccessful in doing it fast enough. And you'll see me like right now mid-level stalling zombies just so I can get my offensive plants down in the other lanes. And this is a strategy that you have to start using towards this point in the game because otherwise you don't have enough time to plant enough offensive plants and the final wave will just end up overwhelming you. But this time I brought in some pretty good plants like the Soul Patch, who's basically impenetrable by these zombies, and then some high damage dealers like the Lumis Lotus, so I wasn't too worried about losing on this level. But a swarm of newspaper zombies could definitely deal enough damage to power through my defenses. So you'll see me doubling up on Soul Patches in some lanes just because I could. And as the final wave was now coming in, I was expecting a crazy amount of zombies, and there was a crazy amount of zombies, but for some reason it was mostly just the most basic zombies. There was only a couple of newspapers and robots, so the final wave ended up being a lot easier than I expected. But next up, a pool level that was a lot scarier. Level 16 is an interesting one as it's named Electricity and it introduces 3 more new zombies, one of which is the robot that deals damage in a 3x3 area, and then there's that zombie holding that lightning rod who also deals damage but it's to a singular zombie in its 3x3 area, and if it happens to be in water it deals 500% more damage. And lastly, you have the other zombie holding a different rod, and that zombie is called the Supernova zombie, and what it does is basically it'll look at what plant you have most of on the field and then it'll stun all of that plant for 5 seconds. But let's jump into the game as I'll be able to explain it better while it's in action. And this time I didn't particularly bring in any new plants, but I brought in plants that I hadn't used in this game, which were the Repeater and the Gatling Pea. But we'll talk about those guys when we start using them because for now we have other problems like the robot in the top lane, who I placed a Tiger Grass down for and a Repeater with a pea patch under it, and even still it took out the Tiger Grass and I had to resort to a cherry bomb because I'm pretty positive it would have taken out the Repeater as well. And all while that was happening, a balloon zombie took my mower in one of the pool lanes. Oh, and I didn't really mention it, but the first zombie was also a balloon zombie and it took out my mower in the top middle lane. But back to that robot Tesla zombie, and the reason it didn't die to the Tiger Grass or the Repeater was because it has about the same amount of health as a screen door zombie does. So they deal a lot of damage and they're pretty tanky, so they are a problem. And by now you might have noticed the blunder I made when coming into this level. I completely forgot to bring in the lily pad or any other plant that could be planted on the water. And around this point, I almost gave up because I felt like that robot was going to get to the end. And since I didn't have any water plants, I thought it might have been worth it, but I chose to cherry bomb the robot, challenging myself to still try and beat this level since I still had the Tiger Grass and its 3x3 radius to hit the zombies in the water lanes. But you can see that my probabilities of winning were pretty low as the robots were just completely destroying my plants. And if we happen to see one of those Rhino robots again in the water lanes, it might be just an instant loss since it's too fast for my plants to attack it. But on the positive side, the electric zombie in the water is unable to hit any of my plants, so I don't really have to worry about those guys. And you can see there's a couple of close calls like the bubble robot in that top water lane as I got past my Tiger Grass, but thankfully I had the cherry bombs recharge up and was able to take it out. But then electric robot came in, completely destroying my Tiger Grass, and I thought it was going to destroy my Repeater pea patches as well, but I got down a Gatling Pea, and if you look at the Gatling Pea, it kind of just shoots a constant stream of peas. So it actually gave me hope that it might be a plant good enough to fend off the robot laser guys. And if you look in the bottom lane, it's actually more than good enough as it took out a couple of balloon zombies, and by the time the Tesla robot got to that third tile, it was able to take that out as well. But right after, we had another pretty close call with the bubble robot, so I had to quickly shovel my twin sunflower to place a cherry bomb to take it out. This was definitely a level that would have been so much less stressful if I just brought in lily pad, but since I didn't, it became one of the most stressful levels that I played in the entire game. But again, on the bright side, it felt like I was getting pretty lucky as we weren't getting any Rhino robots in the water lanes. And now the final wave was coming in, and once again, very luckily, no Rhino robots. And since I'd gotten down multiple Tiger Grasses on the outskirts of the water lanes, they're pretty easily able to take out any zombie that approached there. And after a very painful 12 minutes, we had finally beaten level 16. But next up, things get a lot worse as we're introduced to one of the most devious map layouts I've ever seen. And the name of the first level is And before I even show y'all what plants I chose to take in, let me show y'all the map layout. And here is what we're working with. 2 different lawns back to back, and we have to defend against zombies on both of the lawns. And even worse, the normal lawn has 9 tiles of space that the zombies have to walk past to get to the end. But on this double lawn, we're only given 6 tiles on each side. And of course, I had no idea what to do in the beginning, so I was just farming sun and placing devil nuts in the areas that the first zombies were walking in, later resorting to using a tiger grass as I felt like its 3x3 radius would be very helpful on these levels. And on the topic of plants, I also brought in the pumpkin alongside the dandelion this level. Now the pumpkin does the exact same thing that it does in the other games, but the dandelion in this game has been completely reworked. If you look in the middle leftish area, you'll see that the dandelion there did an attack in a 3x3 radius, and what it does in that 3x3 radius is do a little bit of damage, but its main thing is stunning the zombies that it hits, and then after attacking it takes a little bit of time to recharge. So it's a decent plant and can synergize pretty well with some of the other plants, but I don't think it's good enough to justify using it very often. And of course, I was planting pumpkins on top of the tiger grasses because even though they're pretty good damage dealers, they can struggle if zombies appear in the lanes that they're planted in. And as I was explaining everything, you might have noticed that we lost a ton of lawnmowers, but we somehow made it to the final wave. The main threat this level was the fat zombie that kind of just one-shots your plants, but the tiger grasses attack is just good enough to where they aren't a problem. So even though the level felt overwhelming at first, we were actually able to beat it on our very first attempt. And next up, level 18 was named Caught Off Guard, and it's probably based on the pretty annoying cast of zombies that were going to be sent in. And as I felt threatened, I kind of brought in the direct counters to all the annoying zombies. I brought in the tiger grass, which is basically a counter to most of the zombies in the level. I then brought in pea patrol mainly for the tanky zombies, and lastly I brought in spikeweed for the caravan, because if the caravans aren't dealt with, they can be one of the most threatening zombies in the entire game. But thankfully they have an insane counter like the spikeweed that one-shots them. I also switched up my sun producing strategy a little bit as I focused mainly on the left side because it kind of made it easier to get sunflowers around the orchids. And I could have planted more on the right side, but it felt like I didn't need to as I had a pretty decent amount of sun and couldn't really spend it all. Oh, and on the topic of sun, I completely forgot to mention something, and even though we're an hour in, I feel like I should mention it. And there's a good chance that you already noticed it by yourself, but the sun actually collects itself, so I don't have to hover or click my mouse on the sun. And this mechanic is maybe one of the most helpful things on this map layout because there's already so much to focus on when you're trying to defend both sides. But regardless, I got down a column of pea patrols on both sides paired with the pea patches alongside, of course, the tiger grass wherever needed. And then whenever the caravans would show up, like the one on the top right, I would just place a spikeweed under it and it just stayed there, kind of crippling away slowly. And in doing this strategy, we actually beat this level pretty easily, but it gets a little bit more complicated on the level named Organized attack. Now, what could that mean? Well, for starters, the first zombie that the level sends in is a newspaper zombie. But of course, even the newspaper zombie dies instantly to the cherry bomb like a regular zombie. But then right after, a turtle rider and another newspaper zombie are sent on opposite sides. And I'm so heavy sent on sun producing that I kind of just have to let them go and take the lawnmowers. And if you notice, I even brought in durian pulp because I knew this level was going to be a little bit more difficult than usual just seeing the zombies. But there was a problem in the fact that since the newspaper zombie had taken out nearly half of my sun production, I actually couldn't produce enough sun for the durian pulps, and with some very bad timing, most of my plants were recharging and a robot in the top middle lane on the right side made it to the end. And something a little weird happened where the robot started shooting the durian pulp on the other side, so I thought I had a chance, but then it killed the durian pulp and then it ended me. So I felt like that first strategy wasn't working too well as the zombies are sent in too fast and I just can't get enough sun production for the high sun cost. So on my second attempt, I brought in the very original strategy that we used with the Velociradish hunters, because if you remember, placing down a hatchling reduces the sun cost of the hunter. Oh, and also I brought in the Triceratops, but it kind of instantly died to the newspaper in the very top lane, and although I knew that the Triceratops was a good plant in this game, I was pretty sure it was going to be pretty awful in this level specifically since its recharge was too long. But Triceratops aside, my hopes dwindled dwindled as I saw the Turtle Rider on the left side one-shot my hatchling. So I realized that this strategy wasn't going to work out either, as the Turtle Rider's long range is just a bad matchup against a melee plant, so I decided to restart. And on my third attempt, my mindset was, oh, the Gatling P worked good on that pool level, so why not try it on this one as well? But I quickly realized that this was a pretty awful strategy, as well as I placed a Gatling P in the bottom lane and it got one shot by the Turtle Rider as well. That was mostly my fault as I waited too long to plant it, but the main problem was in the fact that the Gatling P had a really long recharge as well. So I did try to continue and try to beat the level another way, but then as the newspaper zombie on the top left took out one of my twin sunflowers, I realized that my sun production just wasn't good enough for the rest of the level, so I decided to restart again. On the fourth attempt, I was pretty frustrated, so I brought in the tiger grass as I realized that it's probably one of the better plants to use in the late game since it kind of carried me in 10 of the previous levels. I even brought in potato mine for that extra early damage against the newspaper zombies, and this time I brought in a new plant called the Misty Blue, and you've heard me mention it before, not by name, but when I was explaining that the snow pea shooter was one of two plants that has the cold slowing down effect, and Misty Blue is the second plant. But the problem with it is that it costs 350 sun, so I couldn't really utilize it in this fast-paced level, mostly just relying on the tiger grasses, orchids, and the devil nuts. And you can see we made it farther than normal on this level, as for the first time we saw a Gargantuar. But our defenses weren't really built for Gargantuars, as our main attacker was a melee plant and it kinda got wiped out by the Gargantuar instantly. But thankfully the tiger grass in the other lane was able to finish it off. But you might have noticed something on this level, and it's the fact that my sun production is a lot worse than normal. That was due to the reason that I kind of struggled against stopping the zombies from eating the sunflowers. So I kind of found myself in a cycle of losing sunflowers and then having to use more sun to replant them. And not having enough sun on this level was detrimental because on the top left lane, a newspaper zombie and a turtle rider kind of got through all my defenses. And that lane specifically didn't have a lawnmower in it. And so kind of with nothing to do, I lost on this attempt as well, even though I brought in the tiger grass. And by the fifth attempt, I kind of decided to pull off all the breaks and bring in the most overpowered strategy I knew of, which was the magic plants. The only problem is they're decently high sun costs, but the good thing is that I can guarantee that they do enough damage to take care of all the zombies. So I decided to make sure that I was protecting all of my sunflowers for the longest time possible and then stalling the zombies for as long as possible so I could build up my defenses before any big waves were sent in. And on the right side, I decided to focus with roses, and on the left side, I decided to focus with Loomis lotuses, as they're both good enough to handle most of the zombies on their own. Another pretty cool decision I made this time was bringing in two different types of nut plants, which were the devil nut and the normal walnut. I realized that just having one nut plant isn't enough since there's literally 2 times more lanes to worry about. And I think that was one of the biggest saving factors in this attempt. And as we're approaching the final wave, you can see that my defenses were pretty strong. And the runic leaflet is always a good synergy, as you can plant it anywhere on both sides and it'll boost all the magic plants on the screen. So as the final wave came in, I wasn't too worried about losing because I was confident in the damage that my plants could pull off. For example, if you look in the very top left, the Gargantuar there made it all the way to the walnut, taking out the walnut, but then right after was taken out itself, and we finally beat level 19 organized attack. And that was the last of the day double lawns, as next step is Dark Tremor, which is basically the same thing but nighttime. Of course, we replaced the sunflowers with sun shrooms and the cherry bomb with the doom shroom. And this time I decided to give the mecha pea shooter and mecha gatling pea a second chance alongside the triceratops. I kind of decided to go with the mecha plants on the right side and the triceratops on the left side to start off, but I realized that this wasn't efficient enough, so I started placing both on both sides. But right as we're about to approach the second big wave, this Gargantuar on the bottom lane on the right side didn't die to my doom shroom, and I thought it would have died to the mecha pea shooter because it seemed really low on health, but it made it all the way, taking it out, which also took out every other mecha plant that I had on that right side. These mecha plants might be the worst plants in the entire game, and you will not be seeing me bring them in after this level. But for now, I had to kind of just go with the flow, placing down more mechas on the right side in that back lane, and slowly but surely my defenses were starting to look better as I had a column of mecha pea shooters on both sides alongside triceratops. triceratops. And the triceratops has like 2 different forms, but they get kind of complicated, so I'm not really going to bother explaining them as I don't really use it after this level. But just know that it is a good plant. I'm just not using it to the best of its ability because I just didn't know how to at the time. But other than that, the final wave had now been sent in with a couple of gargantuars and football zombies threatening all my plants, with some of them even making it to the lawnmowers. But luckily, since we had protected most of our lawnmowers until the final wave, we'd basically guaranteed our win. And I'm not gonna lie, all my plants on the field got demolished by the final wave, and the lawnmowers paired with the doom shroom were very much needed to defeat this level, with now only a trash can zombie being left on the left side, who I placed a Mega Gatling P and a Triceratops for, allowing us to overcome some pretty bad circumstances. But next up, and this name for a level could really only be referring to one zombie, which was of course the obese zombie. And this guy isn't too big of a threat, as I brought in Durian Pull and was pretty confident that I was going to win this level, as the pinnacle of the zombies of this level was pretty horrible against it. I even brought the Snow Pea Shooter for some support, but since I was so confident, I also took the opportunity to try out a new plant, which was the Sniper Rifle Pea Shooter. And it's an evolution plant that you have to plant on top of a normal pea or any other pea that doesn't have an evolution already. And what it basically does is targets the highest health zombie on the map and shoots at it. And in theory, it's a pretty cool idea, but I felt like it doesn't really do enough damage. I mean, it was put up against the blob in the bottom left, and I haven't explained the blob yet, but it's an extremely tanky zombie that has 3 lives, unless of course you use the Super Melon Black Hole on it, but it can be detrimental to your defenses if you don't have a good enough attacker. And to be completely honest, I think the Sniper Rifle P has a pretty cool concept, but it just doesn't do enough damage to justify using it. But it's definitely a fun plant. But besides the blobs, everything else on the level was pretty easy. And since the blobs were sent in pretty low numbers, I was able to just use the Super Melon Black Holes and the Doom Shrooms to take care of them. And with this last blob depleted of his 3rd life, we had won supper time. But the next level is a little bit more dangerous, and it's named Sneak Attack. Definitely had one of the more annoying starts, as it always started off with the Disco Zombie. And the best method I had to defeat this guy in the beginning was just using the Doom Shroom. But right after taking those guys out, the imps spawn in, and for some reason they're super speedy in this game, taking out all your plants very quickly. And sometimes they're so speedy that I end up missing the Super Melon Black Hole, so I kind of just restarted on the first attempt. And instead of using the Doom Shroom on these dancers at first, I kind of just let them get to the lawnmowers, as I wanted to stall for more sun. It's definitely difficult trying to find a balance between farming for sun and using offensive plants, as the game kind of just constantly throws zombies at you. Like, there's literally 3 zombies on the screen, 2 of them being teleporters and 1 zomblob, and I literally had 0 offensive plants placed down. And a cool little fun fact that I realized with the zomblob this level was, 1, it could fully tank a potato mine hit since it has 3 lives, but even worse, if it sets off a lawnmower, it doesn't fully die like every other zombie, but instead it uses one of its lives, and this zomblob ended up taking me out. Pretty annoying. The 3rd attempt specifically was pretty cool because, 1, I found out that if you cover even the front dancer with the walnut, all the other dancers stop in their tracks as well. Oh, and I should mention that I was trying to make this flower plant work, and it's a supportive plant that boosts nearly all the plants that you place on the map, as it has a 5x5 radius, and I thought that it might be more worth it than the Orchid, since you only have to plant 1 of these and it basically covers one side of the map fully. But after playing with this plant a little bit, I kind of realized that the Orchid was definitely better. But that aside, what was even cooler was that I brought in the Split Pea to counteract the Digger zombies, but I didn't even know that the Split Pea could attack the other side of the lawn with its back end. And this kind of makes it a pretty overpowered plant in these levels, as it's basically planting a pea shooter and then also a repeater at the same time for nearly half the sun cost. The only drawback would be that the repeater shots onto the other side just take a while to travel there. And after learning this, I kind of just spammed the Split Peas alongside some pea patrols, as they were starting to cost half sun. And as we approached the final wave, this run was going much better than the previous 2. And if you look around the bottom rightish area, you'll see that there's one problem, and it's the balloon zombies, because whenever they're hovering over a plant, the Split Peas are unable to hit them. And since I basically had every tile covered, the balloons were just constantly hovering, and one of them made it all the way to the end, taking me out even on this pretty good attempt. But realizing that the split pea was so good and the only problem I would have was the balloon zombies, I brought in the durian pole just to counteract them, because the pulp plants can hit the balloons even when they're hovering over the plants. And so once again, I employed the same strategy of split peas, the pea patrols, the sun shrooms, and the one flower supportive plant. And then when I felt like I had enough sun, I added 2 durian poles each to each side of the map so they can cover the entire lawn. And this worked perfectly as we made it to the final wave without losing a single lawnmower. And even better, we actually ended up beating the entire level without losing a lawnmower. But the split pea strat was definitely something that only lasted one level, as things get much more intense, with next step being the Obliterators level. Was definitely tough, as we're now introduced to another giant robot that's incredibly difficult to take down. And on my first attempt, I brought in Soul Patch because I knew I was going to need it for all the tanky zombies, alongside a Spikeweed and an evolution for it named the Spellweed. And the Spellweed, basically, whenever it dies, like the Spikeweed from the caravan, it'll regenerate over time, coming back to life. And in theory, that sounds pretty good, but its recharge is so atrocious that it never ends up working out. I also brought in the Dragon Cannon and the Bamboo Bombard just for their high damage, and of course lastly the Sun Shroom, Orchid, Doom Shroom, and the Super Melon Black Hole. But if you look on the screen, you'll see that the very first zombie sent in is a caravan. This honestly shouldn't be allowed, and for some reason I used the Super Melon Black Hole here to take it out instead of a Spikeweed. The Spikeweed would have just been cheaper, but as the second one came in, I did end up using a Spikeweed on it, as I didn't have the Super Melon Black Hole charged up. But this was turning out to be really bad, as I wasn't producing nearly as much sun as I needed, because I was constantly having to use the insta-kill plants, and they cost a pretty good penny, and the sun shrooms take a while to get to the point where they start giving you enough sun. And by the time I got to a point where I felt like my sun production was in a good place, the first big wave got sent in. And if you look on the right side, I literally only have one Dragon Cannon placed, and it wasn't even in a lane that a zombie appeared in. But thankfully I was able to get all the zombies besides this one ninja with insta-kill plants, and I kind of left the ninja on its own to kind of stall for sun and just let the lawnmower take it out. Afterwards, spamming the bamboos and the dragon cannons as fast as I could, because I knew the zombies were about to start swarming in. And honestly, this was working pretty well, and we even saw our first big robot guy, but I knew the defenses weren't good enough to take it out, so I used the Super Melon Black Hole on it. But while that happened, a Gargantuar on the left side started causing havoc, as a Doom Shroom and my plants weren't enough to take it out, which allowed it to get all the way to the lawnmower. And I did try my best to preserve as many lawnmowers as I could until the final wave, but I did end up losing a third one to another ninja in the bottom left. And in the top left, a big robot got sent, which was very easily able to take out my Soul Patch with its ranged attack. And as that was happening, the final wave was also sent in, and if you look at my sun, things are looking awful. My defenses are cooked, and I have no sun to plant more. And because of this, a couple of imps were freely able to run to the end of the lawn, taking me out on my first attempt. On my second attempt, I kind of realized like, oh, these levels are getting impossible, so I'm gonna have to use the best of my arsenal. And so far, I felt like my best strategy was the magic one, bringing in the Rose, the Luminous Lotus, and the Runic Leaflet, and so that's exactly what I did. But this level made me realize that this strategy wasn't as nearly as good as I thought it was, because it took too much time to set up, and some of the imps made it all the way to the end, taking out a lot of my lawnmowers. And once again, I ran into the problem of not having enough sun, so the imps in the very bottom lanes made it to the end, taking me out very easily on my second attempt. On my third try, I had a light bulb moment, because I realized that maybe it wasn't the offensive plants that were the problem, and maybe it was my sun producers, because it always seemed like I was losing when I ran out of sun. So this time I brought in the Sun Shroom, the Sunflower, and the Twin Sunflower, so I could spam Sun Shrooms on the left and then the Sunflowers on the right side. And this definitely seemed to be working better, as there was always a plant that I could plant down for sun production, meaning that the recharge of the sun producers wasn't a problem. And so this time I was able to get down a crazy amount of sun producers by the time the second caravan came in. I didn't have nearly as much the last two attempts, and I was still trying to make the flower support plant work, and it definitely did a good enough job this time, because I just had so many sun producers down that I didn't really even need the Orchid, and any extra speed boost to the sun producers was just a bonus. Oh, and my main attackers this time time were the tiger grass, the pea patrol, and also the snow pea shooter for support, and of course the spikeweed to take care of the caravans. And I gotta say, the snow pea shooter is definitely one of the better plants in this game, as its slowdown effect is just so good against the bigger zombies. It basically halves their effectiveness, but of course the main problem lies in the giant robot that can't be hit with the snow effect. And this one, I kind of just had to use a super melon on it, but then of course they sent another one in the same exact lane. But thankfully I had the pea patrol for some tankiness, and I was able to stall it until I got another super melon black hole up, and as soon as I got it, I used it on the big robot to take it out. And what you see on the screen right now is the final wave, and it only has a big robot in the top right lane. It's crazy to think that there's literally gargantuars and caravans on the screen, but I'm not even worried about them as the robot is much more devastating. And I could have just let the lawnmower take care of the rest of the game, but I wanted to beat this level without losing any lawnmowers, and the super melon black hole allowed me to do just that. This win definitely felt good, but what came after this was definitely a disaster. And let me put into perspective why it was a disaster. We were now on the final 2 levels, one of which is Long Night, and the next level will be the ultimate boss battle. And I've been hinting at these levels throughout the entire video, and there was very much a reason behind it. And again, trying to put it into perspective, this entire game took me about 9 hours to complete. And out of those 9 hours, 4 of them were spent on these last 2 levels. And to break it down even more, this level specifically took me 3 hours. And as we play this level, I'll mention the many reasons why. The first reason were these ghost zombies, again inspired from PvZ heroes, and once they're taken out of their regular form, they transform into a ghost that can't be hit with physical damage. So for example, the Rose is able to hit it, but since the ghost was so close, the Rose didn't do enough damage to take it out. And so the ghost took out a lawnmower, but you can see that if we have a Rose placed before the ghost is sent in, the Rose combined with some runics are able to take it out. But a big problem happens when the first big wave is sent in, and it's mainly the teleporter zombies. And they're really annoying this level because they're basically a bucket head that teleports 2 tiles forward, and since we only have 6 tiles to work with, that's basically 33% of the map, and they're instantly able to latch onto one of my plants, taking them out almost guaranteed. The third reason, if you look in the bottom right, were these ninja imps who are basically invisible to any attacking plant until they start attacking a plant, and then they become visible and your plants are able to take them out. I wouldn't consider these guys difficult, more so just annoying to deal with. Oh, and like I mentioned, this level's named Long Night, and more specifically, that's referring to the 5 big waves if you look on the bottom right. And these big waves just get more and more difficult as the levels go on. The second big wave is definitely a devious one because if you look in the bottom right, you'll see these brawler zombies, and the brawler paired up with a robot bubble zombie. And the robot bubble, when it dies, it gives a 5-second invulnerability to any zombie that was near it. And what the brawler zombie does is it basically charges up its attacks and then does a flurry of hits to your plants. It's in a way like Cosmic Brains from Garden Warfare 2. And you can see even one of the best strategies wasn't able to put up with this second big wave. And this was definitely a problem because the second big wave is nothing compared to the next 3. On the first try, I realized that the magic plants weren't good enough for this level, so I decided to switch it up a little bit. I instead brought in the Pea Patrol and Pea Patch for my main damage dealers, and then the Goop Shroom for stalling. And the Goop Shroom was an important choice because the Pea Patrol can't hit the ghost zombies since it does physical damage, but the Goop Shroom doesn't do physical damage, so it is able to hit them. And since the Rose was able to defeat them, I thought the Goop Shroom could as well because it slows them down. But as this ghost made it all the way to the Goop Shroom, I realized that it kind of sucked and I wasn't going to be able to do it with this strategy as well. But I kept on playing just to see how well I could do, and I realized, oh, if one Goop Shroom doesn't work, maybe 2 will. And if you look in the top right, that's exactly what I tried to test out. But even with 2 Goop Shrooms, the ghost was able to make it past both of them. And at this point, I realized the strategy was cooked, so I decided to restart. On the third try, I brought in most of the same plants, but decided to replace the Doom Shroom with the Loomis Lotus, since the magic damage dealers can attack the ghosts, and those guys were the ones I was struggling with the most in the early game. And thankfully, the Loomis Lotus was a pretty good choice against the ghost, as it's able to burst it down in one go. But the problem with this strategy was I wasn't able to get enough sun, as I was having to spend too much on the Luminous Lotuses and the ghosts, and I couldn't focus on any of the other defenses, so the first big wave kind of completely overwhelmed me. So again, I restarted. On the fourth attempt, same strategy, but this time I replaced the Goop Shroom with the Doom Shroom, and I specifically brought in the Doom Shroom because it was important for the big waves, as using a Doom Shroom on one side clears one of the final waves, making it so you only have to worry about one side. And that was kind of the main reason that I felt that I got overwhelmed on the last attempt. And so as the first big wave came in on this attempt, I used the Doom Shroom on the left side, and then as all the zombies on the left side were gone, I only had to focus on the right side. But even with this strategy, I still ended up losing 3 lawnmowers to this first big wave. And afterwards, I was starting to realize that another big problem was going to be the caravans, as I don't have enough Doom Shroom to beat all of them, and the P-Patrol is good at tanking against them, but it will eventually die, and if it gets to a point where there's too many caravans, they will overwhelm me. And the second big wave on this try showed me a couple of good and bad things. The good thing was that this defense was able to hold off basically all the zombies by itself, but the bad thing was it showed me how annoying the teleporter zombies are, as literally one teleporter got past and I couldn't get my insta plants back fast enough, and it got through, defeating me. On the fifth try, it felt like I really wasn't getting anywhere, so I decided to try out a couple of old plants that were pretty good and then a new plant. The old plants being the Orchid, Dragon Cannon, Devil Nut, and Soul Patch, and the new plant, which was one of the most necessary plants to bring in into this level, was the Shroom of Thunder, and it basically does a heavy thunder attack to a zombie in a 3x3 radius. And this guy's really good because you only need 2 of them on each side, and they'll be able to handle the ghosts on their own because they can one-shot their normal form and then also one-shot their ghost form as well. This makes it so we don't have to spend too much sun and we save a lot of space. And my next step in this strategy was placing down as many dragon cannons as I could, but as the first big wave came in, it made me realize that the dragon cannon might be too costly for this to work. But still, with the use of the Shrooms of Thunder and a couple of lawnmowers, I was somehow able to pull off and beat the first big wave. And this kind of gave me hope, so I just started spamming them as much as I could. And this worked wonderfully up until the second big wave came in, because there's 2 problems that even the Shroom of Thunder couldn't handle. One was the bubble robots that gave the zombies invulnerability, and second was the teleporters, who were kind of a direct counter against just using the Shroom of Thunder, as their range just wasn't good enough. On the 6th try, I decided to do something a little different, taking out the dragon cannon and replacing it with a pumpkin. I also got rid of the Goop Shroom and the Super Melon Black Hole, replacing them with the Doom Shroom and the normal Walnut. You can see that I brought in 3 wall plants this time because it truly felt necessary for how much damage the zombies were dealing. And the Walnut is kind of just a cheap stalling plant that I can use in the beginning of the levels. And the pumpkins were of course brought in to protect the Shrooms of Thunder. And this strategy worked really well against the first big wave, and for the most part the second big wave as well. But once again, a couple of teleporter zombies on the very bottom of the left map somehow made it past my defenses, and there was really nothing I could do about it. And I truly started to despise the teleporter zombies around this time because they kept on getting through, and it was literally only one at a time. Like, I'd beat the rest of the level, but then somehow they'd make it past. The 7th try, it was the same strategy, but this time I brought in the Spike Weed and the Spike Rock for the first time. And I didn't know it at the time as I didn't read its description, but the Spike Rock's kind of crazy in this game. I don't particularly make use of it this time, but I should mention that once you get it down, it's basically indestructible. Like, it can take out an infinite amount of caravans and it won't go away. And if you remember how in PvZ 2 the Spike Rock usually has 3 hits by the Gargantuar that it can take before it dies, but in this game it's literally infinite. It can just stall the Gargantuars forever. So I knew that this was definitely going to be a necessary plant to bring in for the end game. And by now y'all probably understand the pain that I was going through to try and beat this level, so let's speed things up a little bit. The 7th attempt was a failure. The 8th attempt was actually a pretty interesting one, as I happened to make it to the 4th big wave. And you're about to see why the 4th and 5th big waves are literally the worst thing in this game. And if you look in the bottom right, you're gonna see this newspaper looking zombie who, once it loses its newspaper, takes out a gun and just shoots down all of your plants. It even took out the P-Patrol nearly instantly, and then the other ones ended up beating me. So though that strategy was good and it got me to that 4th big wave, I knew it wasn't going to be good enough to deal with those guys. The 9th attempt, I tried something new with the Durian Pulse and also this plant called the Crown Inferno. And it's a plant that you have to tap on, and then you can choose where to bring down its fire laser beam from the sky. And using these guys, I was actually able to beat the 4th big wave because all I had to do was Doom Shroom one one side of the lawn, and on the other side, I just spammed the Crown Infernos. And that basically made it to where the newspaper military guys didn't have any time to bring out their guns. But like I mentioned earlier, the Spike Weed and Spike Rock are definitely important plants to bring into this level, because otherwise the caravans just overwhelm you. On the 10th attempt, I brought in the Gatling Pea, and it failed miserably. I brought it in again on the 11th attempt, and I got a pretty solid amount of defenses down on that left side with the Gatling Peas comboed with the Torchwoods and the Soul Patches. And in my mind, this might have been one of the more OP builds that I'd built so far. But this was another time that the teleporter zombies were extremely annoying, because if you look at the pea shooter placements, you'll see that they're 2 tiles forward on that 3rd tile from the front. So when the teleporters teleport, they go right onto my Gatling Peas and my repeaters, taking them out. And due to that one reason, it made my defense completely useless, as it decimated all of my Gatling Peas, and honestly, it would take too long to plant them back. And so I gave up and just let this teleportation zombie take me out on this attempt. On the 12th try, I was definitely getting close to that perfect combo. My only mistake was bringing in the Spellweed instead of the Crown Inferno. And this went horribly, as I lost too many lawnmowers early on, so I decided to just restart. On the 13th try, I got rid of the Spellweed and instead brought in the Tall Nut. The Tall Nut's pretty good in this game, as it's an extremely tanky plant and can work as a soul patch that just can't punch back or regenerate. And it's nice because it can stall the zombies in the beginning of the level so you can farm more sun. And this isn't possible if you only bring in the soul patch. But once again, the teleporters on the second big wave were devastating, and they destroyed nearly all my defenses on the right side. And I was able to recuperate a little bit, but then the third big wave brought in the military zombies again, who gunned down all my plants in that bottom lane on the right side. And since I didn't have a lawnmower, they walked and ran all the way to the end. On the 14th attempt, I tried a melon strategy. It didn't work. On the 15th attempt, my strategy was almost there. There's just one thing that I needed to replace. I thought the Crown Inferno would be good for this level, but I realized that bringing it in makes it so that I can't deal with the early game. And due to this, a couple of hot dog imps on the right side in the bottom lane kind of just plunged forward and were able to take out my plants without me having anything to beat them with. And so they defeated me. On the 16th attempt, my strategy had finally come together, and I replaced the Crown Inferno with a Tiger Grass. And to start this level, you place down your sunflowers with the Orchid and install the ghost zombies before their ghost form with the Tall Nut. And this stalling allows you to get down all your sunflowers on both sides before the first big wave even comes in. But while you're planting the sunflowers, you also want to start prepping your thunder shrooms and also your tiger grasses. At the same time, placing your spikeweed and spike rock evolution whenever it's recharged, because they become extremely important later on. And like the spike rock, you also want to start planting your soul patches as well. They aren't very much needed for the early game, but you definitely have to start placing them right now so you have enough sun and time to get them down in all the places you need for that late game. And on the first big wave, we took a couple of losses because of the teleporter zombies, but it wasn't anything too bad. The main thing was trying to preserve your lawnmowers as long as possible, as they're needed later on. And you can see with the wall plants, I was using the soul patches on the left and then the tall nuts on the right. And this was important because a wall plant is extremely necessary on both sides. It's just that you don't have enough time to get down enough soul patches on the right side by this time. But after getting down 5 on the left side, you can start planting them on the right side. And as the third big wave came in, all the caravans instantly died because we have spike rocks in the front tiles, and most of the zombies aren't a threat at all, but it's literally only the teleporter guys. And it does look pretty bad at first, and it looks like you might not be able to recover from this, but thankfully we have 3x3 attacking plants like the thunder shroom and the tiger grass who are able to deal with most of the zombies, but we did end up losing one lawnmower. But this again wasn't too big of a deal, as we still had all our spike rocks, all our tanks, and most of our sun producers. And if you look in the top left, we actually didn't really need any more sun producers as we'd saved up so much sun, and it mainly just came down to the recharge time of our plants. And our main goal now was getting down as many attacking plants in the empty tiles before the next big wave came in. And as the fourth big wave came in, we had 3 empty tiles, which again wasn't too big of a deal, and all my plants were thankfully able to take out most of the zombies, again leaving just the teleporters like the one in the very top lane who ended up taking that lawnmower as well. We did lose a couple of soul patches, but those were easily replaceable. And then as we're given a pretty decent amount of time before the final big wave, we're able to plant down our attacking plants in the empty tiles as well. And as the very final wave was going to come in, our main plan was to try to defend the right side as best as possible, as we had 2 missing lawnmowers over there. The left side, I was pretty confident that even if all the plants got beaten, we'd be able to win. And this isn't your screen lagging, this is literally what the game looks just like when the final wave was sent in. It's kind of just a lag fest from all the attacks of the zombies and the plants. But once the rubble started to clear a little bit, we lost the lawnmower in the very top lane on the left side, but that took out the last of the zombies there. And looking at the map, the only place that could be a problem is the very top right lane, which right now had a teleporter and a military newspaper zombie on it. But thankfully, before the military zombie was able to take its gun out, our thunder shroom one-shot it, leaving now only a couple of residual zombies who are going to be very easy to defeat. And taking out this last bubble robot and ninja imp, we had finally beaten Long Night, maybe one of the hardest PvZ levels that I've ever played. But don't worry, things weren't going to get easy yet, as we still have to fight. The ultimate battle, though still difficult, it wasn't nearly as bad as the Long Night level, and I think the main reason was that we only had to focus on one lawn once again. But you can see that the game wasn't going easy on us, as it sent all these zombies right off the bat. I had nowhere near enough sun to defend against these guys. And if you look in the bottom right, this level has 6 big waves. That's even more than the previous level. And on this level, the main problems lie with the early football zombies that are sent in. So a couple of my early attempts where I brought in Gatling peas and even scaredy shrooms went horrifically. I then resorted back to some reliable plants like the tiger grass and also the normal walnuts because of how cheap it was. And the tiger grass comboed with the walnuts and the doom shroom was a pretty good strategy to fend off the early zombies. And my other main DPS lied in the durian pool. And I brought in the spike rocks to mainly fend off the gargantuars. And then lastly the soul patch as well, as it's basically the best defensive plant. And the soul patch is very important this level, and you'll see what I mean later on. But for now, we had pretty easily made it all the way to the 5th big wave, where the game sends in a ton of football zombies and a ton of gargantuars that are infinitely stalled in the back because they can't do anything against the spike rocks. But we did have a problem with that robot Tesla in the very top lane because it's actually able to take out the spike rock. But since it's only 5 lanes we have to worry about, it's pretty easily to replace them, so this wasn't too big of a deal. And pretty easily we made it to the very final wave of the entire game, and it basically sent in every zombie in at the same exact time. And these zombies actually got through a lot of my defenses, but I was able to doom shroom, clearing out most of the map. And after taking out this last big robot, came in the biggest robot of them all. This is the final boss of the entire game, and it has 100,000 health. And I mentioned that the soul patch is important because the big robot just guns down all your plants in the back. And the soul patch has that ability where it T-poses and can defend your plants in the back, which kind of give them 1 extra life. And I was doing okay for a while, but then I realized that the durian pool wasn't going to be good for this boss battle, as the boss literally can't be poisoned. And since that was literally my main attacker, I slowly but surely ended up losing all my lawnmowers and getting beaten by this bubble robot. And then I remembered that there's one plant who's really good at doing an insane amount of damage, especially if the enemy is extra large. And this plant was the Crown Inferno, and if you look at the gargantuar, you'll see that it died pretty quick. And the Crown Inferno's attack will work even better on the final boss, as it takes up literally a third of the map. So like the last try, I got down all of my defenses, but this time instead of the durian pults, I had down the Crown Infernos, and they defended extremely well. And it was even better than the durian pull compared to the 6th big wave because the zombies didn't make it past my soul patches. And then taking out these last few robots, the final boss appeared, and as soon as it did, I made sure to click all my soul patches, as I wanted all my plants to survive as long as possible. And after the soul patches, it was the turn of the Crown Infernos, because the sooner I used their attacks, the sooner the next attack would come back, because they have to take a little bit of time to recharge. And I knew I could just spam these attacks willy-nilly because they'd take out any other zombies that would spawn underneath as well. And all I had to do was make sure that I was planting them down whenever their recharge was off, and then also making sure that I was using their attacks as soon as it came back. And this was kind of the gist of the level for the most part, as most of the zombies would get taken out by the Crown Inferno's attack, and the only main threat was the main boss's attack itself. And I got pretty lucky that the boss didn't attack in the very bottom lane where I had 3 Crown Infernos, and with constantly just spamming the attacks, we were eventually able to take out the boss without losing any lawnmowers. And like normal, no special celebration, just the normal victory screen. And that was the entirety of PvZ Beautiful Town beaten. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the video and want to see me play more one-off games like this. Otaku Radish insanely cooked with creating this game, and I had a lot of fun playing it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. Okay, bye bye.